So with the podcast, you are breaking down album by album. So with, it's really good, as I was saying, it's really good to see sort of the behind the scenes. You talk about the Truthless Heroes album and how that, I don't want to say too much, but how that sort of kind of got a little bit toxic towards the production with like studio interference. How do you think that Truthless Heroes would turn out if that didn't happen, if you guys got 100% your say of the story? How do you think it would turn out to today?
Well, pressure on that album was coming from a lot of different sources. At the time, the band was on a major. We were on Atlantic Records. Our peers were blowing up, guys in other bands, whether we're talking about Switchfoot or POD or Blindside. There were a lot of bands that we were surrounded by that came from a similar scene that were really getting some great opportunities.
Yeah.
And so there was a pressure that we put on ourselves to be more exposed. And there's a lot of different ways that bands can go about that, but the pressure that we received in conjunction with the pressure that we put on ourselves was from our label, from our management, to be more commercial sounding.
Yeah.
And I think that dominated a lot of the process. And I think when you have a lot of cooks in the kitchen, when you're doing anything creative, outside forces pushing you towards commercial viability, it can tend to taint the output.
Yeah.
You tend to overthink things and overproduce songs and the record, whereas the previous album, Drawing Black Lines, that was really quick.
Yeah.
And it wasn't a lot of thought put into it. We wanted to make a really heavy, crushing record.
Yeah.
And we were just doing it for fun.
Yeah, that's how you should be doing it. Do it because you enjoy it.
When you have all these considerations and all these other cooks in the kitchen, then it gets a lot more complicated.
Yeah.
And that is it's a long story. I think there's a 2-hour episode.
Yeah.
And the highest level of subscriber for the podcast on Patreon, we have 5 tiers, going all the way from $1 a month up to $50 a month. That highest level is the executive producer level of the podcast. You get your name on every episode, and we will meet up in person. For you and I, that's a little bit more complicated, but we'll hopefully try to sort that out.
Yeah.
Meet up in person, merch packages, and you guys also have your own separate episodes that are only for you, that you choose the content. And so I have it ranked in terms of military, so that the highest level subscriber is the executive producer, is titled the Generals.
Yeah.
That's Generals level of subscription. And it was chosen by the Generals that I would walk through every album in the Project 86 catalog, all 10 of them, and tell the story of that album as an episode. And so we're starting there, and once we get through those 10 episodes, I guess there'll be less than 10 because I did Drawing Black Lines as a free episode for all to hear as just, a hook into the podcast. Like, hey, if you love this, subscribe
for more.
And you'll be able to be a part of what we're doing here and get access to a ton more content. But once we get past those first, episodes for the Generals, it will be up to the committee to decide, what's next.
Yeah.
So that will be an interesting conversation, I think.
Yeah.
Once we get there.
It will feel kind of weird, people telling you what to do and how you should handle your thing. So, with the executive producers or the Generals sort of giving you advice, how do you sort of take that to sort of be more critical rather than us telling you what to do?
That's been one thing about this community that's developing on the Pioneers Patreon is so little of it.
Yeah.
It is critical in the someone just being harsh to be harsh sense.
Yeah.
Once you humanize the transaction, it takes away the troll element. And we're now relating as if we would relate one person to another, or a group of people relating to one another. And so it's largely positive. And so when I ask a question, hey, what did you guys like about this episode? What would you change? Or what type of content, or how I structure these episodes? What are you digging or not digging? What would you like to see different?
Yeah.
And I get a lot of open, honest feedback. I also get a lot of feedback on just ideas. not just guests. I mean, there are a lot of guests' ideas thrown out, and for that I'm always grateful, because more than once there's been a guest suggested that I hadn't thought of, that I hadn't considered, and has made it into a list that I'm working from of potential guests that I want to bring on. But I've gotten tech advice, what microphones to buy, what software to use, distribution tricks.
Oh, really?
Yeah, even the order with which I release episodes has been something that collaborators, you subscribers, have participated in.
Yeah.
We've switched to an every other format where I'll do one episode where it's just me talking about something related to my career, a concept, a story, a piece of work, or all combined. For example, the next episode, the one that I'm almost finished working on that will be released in the next couple of days, is on motivation.
Awesome.
How do you find motivation when you have none to do your work, whether that's creative work, if you are your own boss and there's an endeavor that you're working on that you just don't feel inspired to push forward in, or a craft that you're trying to develop, or a piece of media persona that you're trying to grow. How do you find motivation when you have none? Or if you're staring at a blank page and you're blocked, it's like, man, I just don't know what to write about. I don't know what to talk about. I don't know what to do here. I'm giving 5 techniques that have worked for me.
Cool.
Backed up by specific examples and stories from my history. And then I look at, in the first subscriber only segment, each episode has 3 parts. So first part's free, second part is for a certain tier of subscriber and up, and the third part is for another tier of subscriber and up. So in the second part, I'm telling a story of finding motivation inside a live performance, and how all of the principles I was talking about in the first part of the episode came into play when I started a mud riot at a festival show many years ago. But it was a show where the entire stage was destroyed. My band pretty much hated me afterward. The entire festival and production staff were so mad at me for inciting this thing. And on stage, all of these thoughts are running through my head, but there was all these other thoughts and motivations that were pushing me to say this one sarcastic statement to the crowd that got them worked up to the point where they were hobbing huge mounds of earth onto the stage and destroyed the entire stage at the end of our set. And so it's a really interesting story for me to tell. I hope it's as interesting to people that listen and hear it, on how I worked through all of this discussion of motivation into this one moment on stage. And then finally, the third part of that episode, I'm going to take the lyrics and the story behind a song that the title itself has been a mystery. The subject matter has been somewhat of a mystery, and the story behind it, I know for a fact, has been a mystery up to this point, and that is PS from Drawing Black Lines.
Oh, cool.
And so I'm going to look at everything that went into making that song what it became. And that's what I'm trying to do on these solo episodes, is look at a piece of work and put it in the context of a greater principle that applies to creators, innovators, entrepreneurs.
Sweet. Yeah, that sounds like an awesome thing, especially because it's such an old song, and like you said, the backstory and the actual meaning of the song still haven't been sort of figured out to this day. That's going to be a really interesting to finally have the answer for.
Yeah, and one other goal with these solo episodes for the fans of my band the question I ask myself, is there a way I can reimagine this work? A lot of these songs and albums that have long since been lost to the pages of history in the new sense, at least.
Yeah.
Is there a way to reimagine these so that these songs and these albums take on an entirely new meaning in the minds of the fans, so that they come alive and become something totally different and hopefully brand new again? And you can tell me if that's happening, but I feel like through connecting to this body of work and retelling some of these stories, that I've achieved a new connection or a reconnection to some of this artwork.
Yeah, I haven't heard it, I haven't heard the podcast, so I can't tell you what it is or like how I feel about it, but I can just predict that it's going to be a really good sort of a really good episode to see the meaning of it, because like you said, you've got a new audience now. People don't necessarily know about the song, so it's going to be very interesting to listen to that podcast and then go back to the song and see it with a different mindset, like sort of see it with the mindset of knowing what the meaning is.
Are you caught up to date? Have you listened to much of the content? Have you listened to any of it?
I have listened to at least some of it. I will be honest, I've been pretty busy with work and all that, like you would know, trying to organize this call. Yeah, I've listened to the majority of, or I think I've listened to all of the album breakdowns, and I've listened to a handful of sort of the pilot episodes and like the earlier ones. So I'm not up to date, but I have been trying my best to keep up to date with all of it.
It's good to have some content to binge, like Netflix or something.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's good. The one thing I love about the podcast format, and I listen to a ton of podcasts, is as long as I'm not recording my own episode, you can put it on in the background and sort of tune in and tune out, and it's like you have a friend in the room talking to you, but you don't have to listen to them if you don't feel like it. You can zone in and zone out as something catches your attention. And so I think that's unique about the podcast format and fun. You can put it on while you work and sort of absorb what you have the bandwidth to absorb in the moment. Yeah,
it is a really good, it's basically just another form of listening to music. Like you can just sort of have it on the background while you do your homework, or you're just on the, on your way to work on the bus or anything like that. You can just sort of have it playing. You don't necessarily need to listen to what you're saying, but as long as, you get the general idea of what the podcast is about, it works.
Yeah, man. And so I can't say thanks enough to you again.
Yeah, no worries, man.
For supporting this endeavor and getting on board early and really helping it to become what it is going to become. So it's really, really amazing to know that the music and the work over the years translates into these just awesome supportive relationships with people.
Yeah, you're very welcome, man. Thank you for making all the music that you do, because it's, I'll just chuck on some Project 86. Like, it's a very good pastime to just sort of listen to Project and go about your day. So, thank you for all the music creation that you've done.
Yeah, man. So how many of your friends listen to the band, or how many people do you know in Melbourne that know of Project and like the band?
At least 2 or 3 that not necessarily sort of big fans that will subscribe to the 50 tier of the Pioneers podcast, but ones that I'll chuck on a song and they'll enjoy it. Like one of my mates has played WWE Smackdown vs. Raw 2008, so he knows at least 2 of your songs, and every now and then we'll chuck each other music suggestions. I'll chuck in a Project 86 song, so he will know of those songs, and I'll try my absolute best to get this episode or get this video out here, so people can get a new take on this band that they may or may not have heard of. So I'll just chuck it on my socials and try and spread the word out there. So
that's awesome, man.
Yeah,
that's really cool. It's really cool. Maybe someday, our way back to Melbourne.
Yeah.
And Australia.
Have you been to Australia before?
Once in 2008.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
It wasn't even like a holiday or just a visit to Australia. It was like a band thing. Wow.
Yeah. We played a couple of shows. We played in Queensland, and we played a show in Sydney, and we had a show scheduled in Melbourne, just outside the city.
What happened?
And it was canceled because of weather. It was an outdoor event, and it got canceled because of rain.
Not good enough, Australia. What are we doing? We're letting ourselves down.
I know.
Yeah. So with like I mentioned, your music had been in Smackdown vs. Raw and a bunch of other movies. How is it sort of you know, how is it sort of with the difference, you know, finding a fan base or creating a fan base from releasing your music, you know, online and stuff like that to being featured in a movie and a video game?
Anytime you receive a placement for the song that you've written into something that is of a greater reach in terms of culture than your own fan base, it's very, very exciting. And so I know of a lot of people that have come to hear about the band through that game. The Smackdown versus Raw 2008.
It had quite a lot of reach.
I still have people talking about that with me.
Yeah, like we are right now. Yeah, well, video games are, you know, well, specifically the WWE video games, that's how I know a majority of the bands that I listen to from that. It's such a wide market to release your song into.
Yeah, definitely. I know that was a big placement for us. We've had a few feature films that we've had either music in the film or as a part of the soundtrack. Or during the credits, etc. That's always amazing to see. The biggest placement that the band ever received was for the song Fall Goliath Fall.
Oh, really?
And it was placed in the NCAA tournament, which is a basketball tournament here in the States.
Right.
It's a very widely watched thing. It's called March Madness.
Oh, yeah, I know
and
that.
It's very much watched in the earlier rounds of the tournament because there's a lot of teams that compete in it, and these are college teams. It's widely watched because in the earlier rounds of the tournament, you have these huge upsets that happen every single year. And people love to watch that because the respective fan bases of those teams or the student bodies of those teams lose their minds when there's like an upset. They just storm the court, and it's just like the greatest moment in the history of that small school that defeated that large school or whatever. And so when the tournament is happening, there's a couple of segments throughout the day on one of the biggest television networks in America. There's a segment that's during the day, and then there's a primetime segment, and the primetime segment is the one that everybody tunes into, like millions and millions of people watch it. And so there's a very well-known sports broadcaster voice, a guy named Jim Nantz.
That sounds familiar.
He's hosted the tournament for years and is the main play-by-play guy, and he also does the NFL, he does the Masters, he does every major gigantic sporting event in America.
Wow.
And so for the NCAA tournament, they do this monologue from Jim Nantz to kick off the primetime segment of the tournament. Year, and he talks about the underdogs coming to defeat the heavily favored juggernaut, whatever. So he did this monologue about David and Goliath going into the primetime segments at the beginning of the segment when the most people are watching. And he's talking about there's all these slow motion images of players celebrating and hitting clutch shots and all this stuff. It's like, if you're into sports, it gives you chills. And I grew up watching this tournament. I grew up as a basketball player. So this was like a big deal for me to watch this.
You were like a kid on Christmas.
And so fast forward to me as an adult, I had written this song. My band had written a song called Fall Goliath Fall. And it was about this idea of David slaying Goliath. The story's been told a million times. We just put our own twist on it. And so Jim Nantz does this monologue, and then at the end of it, you hear my band playing.
Awesome.
Fall, Goliath, fall, fall, Goliath, fall. And the words are on the screen.
Oh, that's awesome. Wow.
Millions of people, this fall, Goliath, fall. And it shows all these basketball teams defeating the bigger team, the favored team.
The underdogs,
And so that was the biggest placement we ever had. And that was the coolest moment I've ever had. In terms of just connecting all those dots there in that one story, the nostalgia element for me. That was really cool.
Yeah, and as much as you can make a music video and have sort of your own, you know, you have the music video for Goliath 4, so you have your sort of your own take on how the story is told, but it would be so much cooler to see, you know, especially the basketball, you know, company, you know, doing their own kind of music video with the letters and all the monologue. That would just be such a cool thing to see, somebody taking your song and creating, you know, such a bigger story for it. So that would be such a good feeling.
Yeah, it was amazing. That was one of the best moments of my entire history in doing what I do, just to see the song used in that way to something that had alongside something that had such meaning to me personally.
Yeah.
In addition to the music.
Yeah.
It's just incredible.